There is a barn near Charles City, Iowa, in Floyd County, where three tractors sit in permanent stillness. A 1962 Oliver 1800 in Meadow Green, a 1978 Minneapolis Moline G1000 in Prairie Gold, a 1952 Alice Chalmers WD in Persian Orange. None of them have turned over in 43 years. The paint on each one has weathered to a specific shade of forgetting. The orange is now salmon gray. The green is the color of old copper pipes. The gold has become the color of dust itself. Three companies built those three machines. All three stopped building tractors between 1985 and 1989. All three are now entirely gone. The man who owns the barn is 87 years old. He bought the first Oliver new in 1962 for $3,400. He paid cash. He still remembers the salesman's name. The salesman's son went bankrupt during the 1980s farm crisis. The salesman never recovered. The company the salesman worked for didn't either. Between 1981 and 1986, over 300,000 American farms were foreclosed. This is not a metaphor about economic cycles. This is not nostalgia dressed up as history. This is the precise figure. During that same period, the agricultural equipment manufacturers that had dominated the American landscape since the 1890s simply ceased to exist. Not all at once, but in a cascade so swift that by 1990, the entire structure of farm implement production in North America had been fundamentally reorganized. It happened faster than the extinction of any major American industry, except one. When Oliver Hart Parr founded his company in Charles City, Iowa in 1908, he was not trying to build the world's greatest farm tractor. He was trying to solve a specific problem. American farmers were dying. Not metaphorically, literally. The threshing machines of the 1890s required teams of horses to power them, between 8 and 12 horses per machine. A farmer running a threshing operation would need so many horses that he couldn't feed them profitably. The equipment required was the threshold a farmer could not cross. Hart Parr's first gasoline tractor, built that year in Charles City, produced 30 horsepower. It could replace 8 horses. It could be maintained by one man. By 1912, Oliver Hart Parr had sold over 10,000 of them. The color that defined that company did not come until 1929. That was the year Hart Parr merged with 3 other manufacturers, Nichols and Shepard, American Seeding Machine Company, and Advanced Thresher, to form the Oliver Farm Equipment Company. When they merged, they made a decision that seems almost absurd in retrospect. They picked a single color for all the new Oliver equipment that would be built in Charles City for the next 60 years. Meadow green. Not forest green, not hunter green. Meadow green. A specific formulation that, when it left the factory in the Iowa sun, seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Every farmer in the Midwest would recognize meadow green from a mile away down a farm road. A meadow green tractor meant Oliver. Oliver meant reliability. Reliability meant you could take a loan against it. Between 1929 and 1952, Oliver became the second largest tractor manufacturer in the United States, behind only Deere. They employed 5,000 people in Charles City alone. The factory in Charles City became the second largest employer in Iowa outside of agriculture itself. But there's a moment, a specific moment, when a brand reaches its peak. For Oliver, that moment arrived in 1947. The Oliver 70 was released in January 1947. It was a row crop tractor, meaning it was designed to work between vegetable rows and corn rows in the field, and it produced 35 horsepower from a 6-cylinder engine. The original price was $1,850. At auction today, a well-maintained Oliver 70 in good meadow green sells for between $18,000 and $24,000, depending on condition. But the real golden model, the machine that became the standard every farmer in the Corn Belt measured everything else against, was the Oliver 88, released in 1947 and produced continuously until 1958. It produced 48 horsepower. It cost $2,950 new. A retired farmer from Clinton County, Iowa, named Robert Feehan, described running his family's Oliver 88 in oral history interviews conducted by the University of Iowa. You could spend all day in that seat, and your back would tell you that you'd spent all day in that seat, but the tractor would not quit. It would pull anything that could be bolted to it. The color was so bright in spring that you could see it in the morning sun from clear across a quarter section. Every farm in the township had one or wanted one. The Oliver 88 is the machine that best represents what made American agricultural equipment manufacturing possible in the first place. A perfect convergence of engineering simplicity, manufacturing efficiency, and farmer psychology. It was not the most powerful tractor on the market. It was not the cheapest. It was the one that every farmer, after 5 years of running one, understood deeply enough to teach his son how to run it. By 1960, Oliver Farm Equipment Company had manufacturing operations in 6 American states, employed nearly 12,000 people, and had sold more than 2 million tractors and implements since 1929. The meadow green of an Oliver tractor was as common on the landscape of Iowa, Illinois, and Minnesota as the green of a cornfield itself. What happened next was the decision that every dealer in the Corn Belt had feared for a decade, and it arrived exactly as they had feared it would. In 1960, Oliver was still profitable, but felt increasing pressure from larger competitors, particularly John Deere and International Harvester. Deere had vertical integration. They made engines, hydraulics, and implements under a single corporate structure. Oliver was forced to source components from independent suppliers. In 1960, an investment group led by the Crossley family acquired controlling interest in Oliver Farm Equipment Company. By 1962, that investment group had merged Oliver with Hartpar's former partner, Nichols and Shepard, along with farm equipment operations from the White Motor Corporation. The company became White Farm Equipment. The problem was not the name change. The problem was the efficiency metrics that came with it. White Motor Corporation, based in Cleveland, Ohio, was a truck manufacturer with no agricultural heritage, no understanding of farmer loyalty to color, and no comprehension of the fact that a meadow green tractor sold in Dubuque, Iowa in 1960 would be used by that farmer's son in 1980 and his grandson in 2000. White Motor saw only manufacturing cost per unit, factory capacity utilization, economies of scale. In 1964, White Motor made the decision to consolidate Oliver's Charles City factory and Minneapolis Moline's Hopkins, Minnesota factory into a single manufacturing complex. Minneapolis Moline, founded in 1929, had its own iconic color, prairie gold, and its own dealer network across the northern Corn Belt. Over the next 8 years, 4,000 manufacturing jobs left Charles City, Iowa. The population of Charles City, which had peaked at 8,400 people in 1960, began a decline that has continued for 60 years. As of 2020, Charles City had 7,200 people remaining. By 1972, White Farm Equipment stopped painting any tractor in meadow green. The color disappeared from the landscape not because farmers stopped wanting it, but because a corporation in Cleveland, Ohio decided that mixing 2 shades of green paint was less efficient than mixing one. The same pattern was repeating everywhere. Allis-Chalmers, founded in West Allis, Wisconsin in 1901, had painted their machines Persian orange since the 1930s. By 1961, Allis-Chalmers employed 9,000 people in West Allis alone. They manufactured the D17, the D19, and dozens of implements. A D17 Allis-Chalmers in Persian orange was as much a symbol of prosperity in Wisconsin and Illinois agriculture as the barn itself. In 1961, Allis-Chalmers merged with Deutz, a German tractor manufacturer, becoming Allis-Chalmers Deutz. By 1973, Allis-Chalmers had sold off its European operations and refocused on North America, but the damage was done. The company had lost its singular focus. Too many engineers in too many countries trying to decide what an Allis-Chalmers should be. Between 1973 and 1979, Allis-Chalmers reduced its workforce in West Allis from 9,000 to 3,200. The Persian orange began to disappear from the landscape. Not because the tractor was bad, because the company had lost the narrative of what it meant to be an Allis-Chalmers. International Harvester, headquartered in Chicago, had painted their machines Farmall red since 1921. IH was the largest agricultural equipment manufacturer in the world in 1970. In 1975, they employed over 100,000 people across North America. Then came 1980. There is a document in the AGCO archive. Yes, AGCO, the company that would eventually consolidate what was left of the industry, that shows the precise date when the agricultural equipment manufacturing economy broke. It was August 15, 1981. On that date, the Federal Reserve, under Paul Volcker, raised the federal funds rate to 21.5%. The decision was made to break inflation. The consequence was that American farmers, already carrying equipment debt at reasonable interest rates, suddenly found themselves unable to service that debt. A farmer who had borrowed $400,000 against a combine, equipment, and land improvements in June 1981, which was possible at a 12% rate, would have found that same debt costing him 21% by September. If his gross revenue was $600,000 annually and his operating costs were $450,000, he had $150,000 of gross profit. When interest rates rose, his debt service went from $48,000 annually to $84,000 annually. He was now underwater by $84,000 per year. By 1982, the average age of an American farm debt holder was 53. These were men and women who had built their farming operations across the entire 1970s, when interest rates made sense. They had made decisions based on rational economics, and in August 1981, those decisions became catastrophic. What happened next was predictable and irreversible. Equipment sales collapsed. In 1981, John Deere, International Harvester, and Case combined produced nearly 800,000 tractors annually. By 1985, that number had fallen to 180,000. This is not recession. This is industrial extinction in 4 years. International Harvester, which had been profitable across the entire 1970s, ran catastrophic losses. In 1981, the company made a critical decision. They would sell their farm equipment division. They needed cash. They needed it now. Tenneco, a Houston-based conglomerate, purchased International Harvester's farm equipment division in 1985. Tenneco was an agricultural chemical and industrial equipment company with zero heritage in tractor manufacturing. Within 5 years, Tenneco had closed the original IH manufacturing complex in Illinois. The Farmall Red began its disappearance. Case, which had manufactured in Racine, Wisconsin, was acquired by Tenneco in 1985. Their Flambeau Red tractors, another iconic color, another identity that meant something specific on the landscape, were consolidated into a single manufacturing facility in North Carolina. The Racine plant, which had employed 1,200 people in 1980, closed entirely in 1988. Population of Racine fell from 85,000 in 1980 to 75,000 by 1990. Allis-Chalmers, weakened by the Deutz merger and the farm crisis, attempted a pivot to construction equipment. The company stopped manufacturing agricultural tractors for civilian use in 1989. The Persian Orange disappeared. Minneapolis Moline, consolidated into the White complex in Charles City, stopped producing MMs in 1975. The Prairie Gold was already gone by the time the farm crisis hit. The brand name was acquired by AGCO, a company formed in 1990 specifically to consolidate what was left of the industry. What the collapse of agricultural equipment manufacturing in a single decade reveals is this. The farm crisis of 1981 to 1986 was not the cause of the industry's extinction. The industry's extinction was already implicit in the corporate consolidation decisions made in 1960 to 1975. Allis-Chalmers hired a German engineering department. Oliver got merged into a truck company in Cleveland. International Harvester stopped being a farmer-focused company and started being a conglomerate. Case allowed itself to be acquired by a chemical company. Minneapolis Moline was folded into a larger structure. Each decision made individual sense. Each decision was economically defensible. Each decision cumulatively destroyed the very thing those companies had built, a relationship between a farmer and a machine and a color. When the farm crisis hit in 1981, those companies did not have the flexibility to survive it. They could not pivot. They could not invest in product. They could not risk anything. They could only cut costs and consolidate further. By 1990, the agricultural equipment manufacturing economy looked completely different. John Deere, still independent, controlled by the Deere family. AGCO, a new holding company that owned Case, Massey Ferguson, Allis-Chalmers, brand name only, and Minneapolis Moline, brand name only. Tenneco's agricultural division, minimized. Everything else, gone. The factory towns tell the story most clearly. Charles City, Iowa, population in 1960, 8,400. Population in 2024, 7,100. The Oliver factory is gone. The Minneapolis Moline factory is gone. The White Motor Consolidation Point is gone. Main Street has the same architecture, but the buildings are empty or converted to offices. The downtown theater closed in 1987. The Oliver tractor dealership is now an antique mall. The factory workers' pensions were partially honored. The meadow green and prairie gold of the tractors that had been built there are now seen only in museums or fields where they are being deliberately preserved. West Allis, Wisconsin. Population in 1960, 63,200. Population in 2024, 60,400. The Allis-Chalmers factory is gone. The Persian orange is gone. The original manufacturing complex has been redeveloped as a mixed-use space. There is a heritage museum now. Every August, West Allis hosts an Allis-Chalmers Collector's Day. 500 people show up. They bring their Persian orange machines. They bring their fathers and grandfathers. One man brought a D17 that his father bought new in 1951. He is 71 years old. His father is 96 and sat in the passenger seat while he drove the D17 through the streets of West Allis. Hopkins, Minnesota. Population in 1960, 6,200. Population in 2024, 21,000. Hopkins actually grew because it became a suburban extension of Minneapolis. But the Minneapolis Moline factory is gone. The Prairie Gold is gone. There is nothing on the landscape that indicates a Prairie Gold tractor was ever built there, except in the memory of the people who worked in the factory and the farmers who ran the machines. Racine, Wisconsin. Population in 1980, 85,400. Population in 2024, 77,300. The Case factory is gone. The Flambeau Red is gone. What stands where the factory was is now a field. But somewhere tonight, in a machinery shed in eastern Nebraska, a 1963 Minneapolis Moline G1000 is having its magneto timed for the show season. A 73-year-old man is doing the timing, the same man who bought the tractor at an auction for $3,400 in 2001. He learned how to time a magneto from his father, who bought a G1000 new in 1963, and taught his son everything about that machine over 60 years. The company that built that G1000 no longer exists in any meaningful form. The factory where it was built is a parking lot. The knowledge of how to run that machine lives only in people. It lives in this man's hands. It lives in the 400 people who showed up to the Iowa Antique Tractor Pull in August and brought their Persian Orange, Meadow Green, Prairie Gold, and Flambeau Red machines to be weighed and run and celebrated. The antique tractor movement in America is not a hobby. It is a refusal. It is a deliberate choice by farmers and rural mechanics to keep alive the knowledge that a corporation in Cleveland, Ohio, decided was not worth preserving. Between 1960 and 1990, the agricultural equipment manufacturing industry consolidation did not simply close factories. It severed a chain of knowledge that had been unbroken since Oliver Hart Parr's first gasoline engine in Charles City in 1908. A teenager growing up on an Allis-Chalmers farm in 1975 would learn from his father how to adjust the carburetor, how to time the ignition, how to read the soil conditions that the machine needed to respond to. By 1985, the company that built that machine no longer existed. The knowledge transfer still happened, but it was now illegal in a meaningful way.
Parts were unavailable. The company had chosen not to manufacture them. The knowledge lived only in people.
That choice, the choice to kill a brand rather than preserve it through harder times, is what separates the agricultural equipment industry collapse from other American industrial declines. The textile industry declined because foreign competition was cheaper. The steel industry declined because integrated mills became inefficient. The automotive industry adapted. But the agricultural equipment industry was destroyed from within by companies that chose consolidation and efficiency over heritage and knowledge and the relationships between farmers and the machines they owned. The Persian orange of an Alice Chalmers did not disappear from the landscape by accident. It disappeared because companies in Cleveland and Houston decided that corporate efficiency was more important than the identity that farmers had built their lives around. The machines themselves would have lasted. The meadow green of an Oliver 88 is still bright green today, 75 years after it was built. The tractor has passed through 3 owners. It still works. Every fall, that 88 is still pulling equipment on a farm in Winnesheek County, Iowa, the same county where Oliver Hartpar's first tractors were sold in 1909.
The machine did not fail. The company failed. The company failed because it chose to forget what it meant to be an Alice Chalmers, or an Oliver, or an International Harvester. And when the farm crisis came in 1981, when the interest rates made borrowing impossible and the equipment sales collapsed to 1/5 of what they had been 5 years earlier, when a farmer stood in front of his equipment dealer and said, "I need to borrow against this tractor to survive until commodity prices recover," the company he needed to believe in was already gone. The tractor was there. The land was there. The farmer was there. The company was no longer there in the meaningful sense. It had been replaced by a division of a larger corporation, which had replaced it with another larger corporation, and so on. The collapse of the American farm equipment manufacturing industry was not a market failure. It was a choice. It was the choice to value efficiency over relationship, consolidation over identity, and corporate structure over the knowledge that lives in people's hands. That choice is why a barn still stands outside Waterloo, Iowa, with 3 machines in it. Machines that represent 3 companies, 3 colors, and 3 ways of understanding what it means to be a partner to a farmer and to a farm. The barn is still there. The machines are still there. But to find anyone who remembers the companies that built them, you have to go back more than 40 years. And that gap between the machine that still works and the company that is entirely gone is the real loss. Not the tractor, the memory. Not the color, the identity it once meant on a landscape. Not the factory, the relationship that the factory once made possible between a farmer and the machine he trusted with his life and his livelihood. If your father ran a meadow green Oliver, or a Persian orange Alice Chalmers, or a prairie gold Minneapolis Moline, the next story is one you will want to hear. It's about how a community of people decided to keep those machines alive when the companies that built them gave up. Subscribe, and you'll be there when we tell it.